Eternal Spirit, may the concepts that we hold today in this meeting be those of wisdom, of service, and of right action. In every thought, word, and act, may we show complete accord with universal law.
Sweet.
Welcome.
All right.
Welcome,
Delighted to
Michael.
be here.
Thank
Delighted to be
you.
here.
It's an honor to have you.
Looking forward to seeing what unfolds.
Yes, yes. So this is the very first episode of Conversations with Serene. So I know we're going to go into lots of inspiring places that will educate and empower whoever tunes in. And I am just honored to have you here because we have a lot in common. I don't remember how exactly we met, but we have similar interests, similar education, similar passions and aspirations. And so I'm really curious to learn more about you because I know we're still getting to know each other, but you've said a lot of things that have resonated with me, and I believe that are important for others to consider this, moment and time and space. And if you could share a little bit about yourself, your background, your history, and what's really on your mind today, we'll go from there.
Well, one of the things that I'll tap into based on what you just said is there's one aspiration that I don't have that you do have. And that was actually what led me to connect with you when I saw you on Facebook. We connected through Facebook. And that was your aspiration to run for president of the United States in 2024. And that just, when I saw someone with the CT background, which is my background as well, many years ago, having spent many an hour sitting in Fleet's living room talking with him. It was like, wow, that would be awesome to have somebody with that kind of knowledge in that position. So I'm here to support that. Not anything I'm ever interested in going for, but I certainly hold the space for you on that one. Otherwise, I'm a naturopath. I've taught up to phase 6 of concept therapy, and that was, gee, I started into that about 44, 45 years ago. And the bottom line of what my life, what I shifted out of or into when I moved out of teaching concept therapy was into the first century Aramaic language of Yeshua. The man was popularly known as Jesus, but his name is actually Yeshua. And I'm the director of a foundation that's translating a copy of the oldest known New Testament, its original Aramaic language, into English. My original work, my original background's in electronics with a side study in physics. So when I ran into the Aramaic language and the New Testament in Aramaic, it was, for me, it was, oh, this is not theology. This is physics. This is physiology. This is psychology. This is genetics. This man knew what he was talking about how this energy system works. And the Greeks took it and brought it into the Western world. And if Yeshua sat in most circles where they're ostensibly talking about his work, he'd say, that's all Greek to me. And so what I've worked diligently to do the last 40 years of developing a body of work that I've developed over the last 50 years is bringing the first century Aramaic meanings of those words into English in a way that makes it usable. With my background in electronics and computer design, electronic repair, if you were building or repairing a piece of electronic equipment, it really didn't matter what your philosophy was. The thing had to work when it came off the other end of the bench. And so what I've done is worked to bring what I learned from Dr. Fleet and then what I learned from the first century Aramaic teachings of Yeshua into a set of tools, into a set of how do we accomplish this thing of functioning as human beings? And what is a human being? So that's been the focus of my work for the last 50 years, and specifically with the Aramaic for the last 40. And people say, well, you talk about this thing called love. Well, define it for me. What is it? There aren't enough words big enough to embody what that is. But I have come up with an experiential definition. And that is, have you ever held a newborn baby? And if you've held a newborn, then go back to the moment. I mean, literally put your hands in the position where you're holding that newborn. Go back and tap into the essence of that newborn. Now, I've asked tens of thousands of people all over the globe in all kinds of cultures, people speaking different languages, different histories, but everybody's got the same answer for their experience of a newborn. And that is, it's always the word they come up with. I asked for a single word. The word they come up with is always some variation on the theme of love. And my take from that, my offering from that is because we all know that that's what human life is. I'll generally, once people have tapped into that essential nature of the newborn, I'll then ask them, so you define it as love. Now, is the newborn loving you or is the newborn love? And everybody's answer, people stop and their heads kind of cock a little bit. And they go, well, obviously the newborn doesn't even know that I'm here. So the newborn is love. And I find it interesting that we were brought into a culture as beings created from this essential energy called love, and we had it slapped out of us. That's the specialty of this culture. And then we were sent out the door to try and find somebody to love us or find somebody to love. And we've got it backward. Everything language-wise in this English, Greek-based culture is backward. Vladimir Lenin, this man's probably responsible for more deaths than anybody on earth ever, says the way you destroy a culture is change the meaning of its words. When we make love into sexual athletics or, put your head on a chopping block and sacrifice yourself for someone, then they know they love you. We've got it backward. It's a state of being. And in order to accomplish that state of being, Yeshua specifically developed a set of tools for how to incarnate or embody that state of being. And the primary tool that he used to teach people that is he taught people how to forgive. And he had a specific technology of forgiveness. And that technology of forgiveness is a technology for removing what doesn't belong. The Greeks turned it backward. In other words, they totally changed the definition of. And now we're told that, by the Greeks, if I have pain moving in me, of course, it's all their fault, but I'll just be big about it. I'll forgive them. I'll let them off the hook for what's moving inside of me. If I had 7.5 billion people in the world come by my door and I shook every one of their hands and said, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you, I've done nothing to change what's moving inside of me. Yeshua had a technology for collapsing the constructs of the mind based in hostility and fear and making the space for human life, active love, to show up in this human form. If it's true that human life is love, then a human form without the active presence of love is not a human being. The form does not make a human. It's the active presence of love incarnated in that form that makes a being. And so that's kind of the foundation of what I've developed is the technology of forgiveness. There's a specific technology that he presented for how to achieve the removal of all hostility and fear and leave this device we call a body-mind unit as a space where active present love could enter because there was no conflicting energy, and then bring that into the world. It's interesting in the Aramaic language, the word prayer does not mean put your order into the cosmic gift catalog. The word prayer in Aramaic means to set a trap for God. It sounds kind of strange at first, but if you think about the TV antenna on your roof, if it's aligned properly, it's the right shape antenna, and you want to watch channel 2, you turn it on and the antenna traps channel 2 and pours a signal into your TV and you watch this beautiful picture and sound. I'd offer that our device as the body-mind unit was designed to capture the energy in which we live, move, and have our being, and that our essential nature is made of, and reflect that, be able to pour that into the world. So that's kind of the foundation of where my work's gone over the last 50 years, and what my commitment is to life is to make that understanding available to every mind, heart, and being on the planet.
Mm. Thank you, Michael. There's so much to unpack there. I hope I do a good job. I'm curious, I'm going to go back a little bit, and I do want to go through like a lot of the things that you shared because I feel like for some people this may be the first time they hear a conversation like this. And so, um, just I'm from your perspective, what do you just what's the best way to summarize concept therapy? Because there are people that don't know what that is, and I'm not necessarily promoting it, but I think it is a great. It's been a great resource in my life. So I'm curious, what's how would you summarize it in your life?
Well, the perceptual constructs of the mind are made of concepts. If we have concepts rooted in hostility and fear, then the mind cannot output concepts that support the truth of being expressing through this body mind unit. So this person comes into a space totally committed to being loving, caring, and nurturing to this other person over here. But this other person carries an energy that says, I'm supposed to be abused. And through resonance, if that energy matches something in me that ties into abuse, then here I come as a human being, as love, and a concept in my mind of abuse comes up, takes over my behavior, and now I'm being abusive to the person I was committed to being loving to. What just happened? I need therapy. I need to clean up the conceptual structure of my mind so that everything in my structure is based in love and supports my expression as love in the world. So it's cleaning up not only those things that have gone on in our own lives, but recognizing that we have literally in our genes these energetic patterns that through denial and dissociation have been shut down, shut down, shut down. And when we step into the right field, those things pop open and take over. And those are the things we need to clean up. So that would be my definition, is cleaning up the conceptual framework of our structure so that all corrupt data, everything that the mind can output, every structure the mind can output that's based in hostility or fear is corrupt data. So I define it as cleaning up the corrupt data and making of this instrument called a body mind unit a fit vehicle for the expression of love in the world, to bring that
Hmm.
active presence of love forward.
Thank you. I feel like that was the perfect example that you gave. It's interesting because this morning I was thinking about the connection between love and abuse in my own life, and how that was something I learned early on in childhood, and how it was something that I attracted in my life until I started, studying this work and realizing that I need to pull all those weeds out, and put in the right
That's it.
concepts. It's interesting. The reason I bring it up though is I know a lot of people say, "Oh, trust your gut," and I've learned because of my faulty early childhood association of love and abuse, I couldn't trust my gut because it was backwards, and so it's I've had to take emotion out of my decision making processes, whether something is good or bad for me. I've had to learn to reason correctly and go against my gut oftentimes. But the more I've done that, the easier it gets and the better it feels, and,
Yes.
and it's helped me to have healthier relationships. And I think that's important to keep in mind because even people that haven't had such I guess, dramatic beginnings in the world, nobody's perfect. Even though, and I want to get more into this too, even though like we are love, we're not always, at least in my opinion, and feel free to, chime in. I feel like we're not always very loving with ourselves or others. And so we lack role models, right?
And that,
What we
but
see around us isn't always love or loving.
right. Well, and that's where to me the therapy work comes in. You know, the mind organizes everything in files, so to speak. So if I have a file in my mind on relationship and my early relationships were abusive, and I don't clean that corrupt data out of my mind. You know, a lot of people want to live in the world of affirmations. Oh, I'm going to pretend this is true, even though my gut knows it's not. I'm going to pretend it's true. I want a wonderful relationship. But somebody who affirms, I want a wonderful relationship, but has in their gut relationships mean abuse, literally the high energy wave that moves out from them that resonates experiences in is the one about abuse. Now, I used to keynote at a conference called Global Sciences out in Colorado. This is years ago, 40 years ago. And one year, a gentleman named Marcel Vogel, who was a 23-year senior scientist from IBM, came to the conference and presented. Marcel had the kind of mind that at the age of 11, he invented and patented chemical light. You know, if you go to a football game and you buy a light stick, plastic, and you break the tubes inside, the chemicals mix and it lights up. That was Marcel's invention at the age of 11. His family didn't have the money to patent it. At 11, Marcel patented his invention. The only reason you and I are talking right now is because Marcel Vogel worked for IBM and he invented the magnetic coating that allows our hard drives to store information. So that's the kind of mind Marcel had. So he came this particular year with a thing called a Delaware camera. It's a camera that between the lens and the film upon which the energy is impregnated to create a picture, there was a tuning mechanism. So you could tune this camera to different frequencies. What Marcel showed us was pictures taken by the camera that showed the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. Literal high energy waves. So if I put in my mind wonderful relationships, but at the deepest part of my file, in the unconscious part of my mind, what was called the heart in the ancient teachings, there's abuse, then that affirmation, unless I clean this part of my unconscious mind up, sends out a message that says, I need somebody who will abuse me because I want a wonderful relationship. And of the million people I could attract or resonate into my space, who am I going to draw? The person who knows exactly how to touch that abuse in me. And my take on that is that life abhors death. And so the system of life has been set up so everything that we're holding on to that could ultimately kill us, life keeps sending us through resonance somebody to bring it up for us. We, you know, there's a big conversation on the planet right now about this fearsome one world satanic religion that's going to come along and take over the world. Everybody that's talking in their fear about the one world satanic religion doesn't realize the one world religion has been around for thousands of years. And most of churchianity lives in the one world religion, and the one world religion is blame. So if somebody comes along now through resonance and brings up my pain, and I use that pain to make a picture of them, it's not mine, so I live in denial. And I define denial as thinking or speaking as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me. So when I say, oh, that behavior you did, you just hurt me, I'll take the energy that's causing my hurt and I'll build a literal structure, a picture of them. And they'll show up in my mind with my problem attached, and I'm sure it's their problem. And that's where the Greeks came up with, now you forgive them. As opposed to, you've got a false construct based in corrupt data, some form of hostility or fear. You've got to learn to collapse that. And that's what forgiveness does. Forgiveness is not about letting other people off the hook. Forgiveness is about how you collapse the construct in your mind that's lying to you. And when you collapse it, it drops in on its own footprint. And you get to clean up the original energy that's at the root of that projection. So that's so as opposed to affirmations, I have developed a process I call mind shifters. So when somebody goes, well, yeah, give me that affirmation, that a wonderful relationship thing, I say, okay, so here we go. Here's a mind shifter for you. We're not going to give you an affirmation. Here's a mind shifter. And here's your mind shifter. I always attract the perfect relationship that brings up everything I need to heal, and I gently and easily heal myself. Now take a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle, write that on the left side of the page, and use that as a catalyst to resonate what you've dissociated from in your own mind, get that vibrating strongly enough in the mind until pop, it comes to awareness. And now that you've got that little sucker up out of the unconscious, you get to clean it up. Oh, relationships mean abuse. Boy, why do I believe that? Well, my power person abused me and they said they love me, so that must. So I use that mind shifter, pardon me, as a catalyst to bring up what I need to deal with, rather than having to play it out over and over and over and over again until I finally get, gee, I've been through this abuse 87 different times with 42 different people. Maybe I'm involved in my life. Maybe I should start looking inside of me. You can short circuit that whole thing with a mind shifter and forgiveness and go right to the root of why I'm drawing this into my life. And as I remove that energy, which is forgiveness, I no longer, there's no resonance in me for that anymore. I don't draw that person to me or that behavior out of that person. The whole game changes.
Thank you for explaining that and all the clarification, because I was going to ask you for, an approach to changing that energy around. I found that I have a degree in psychology, and I decided not to become a therapist because I felt like there's a huge focus on pathology and the past,
Right.
and I really like to move forward, not just keep revisiting over and over
Right.
again.
Well,
And
the name of my book is Why Is This Happening to Me Again?
yes,
And
that's one
people
of the
can
things.
download it free from my website. If you just go to whyagain, whyagain.org, there's a picture of the book in the middle of the page. They can click there and they can download the book. And I think that we've got 9 different languages right now.
Nice. Yeah, that was one of the things I
Free.
wanted to mention is you have all these great resources you've created for people that you give away to just help whoever is willing to do the work themselves. And that's, I mean, we
Well,
all have to. There,
yeah,
nobody else can work on ourselves.
yeah. Well, that, and we do a radio show 5 days a week, an hour a day from 1 till 2 o'clock Eastern time. We've been doing that for 11 years. So there, I don't know, something like 4,000 hours in our archives that people can go back and listen to. But if people start to, let's say, do a mind shifter and they're like, I don't know what to do with this, call the radio show 1 till 2 o'clock Eastern time. Just call 563-999-3581 and you'll be having a conversation with me and we'll
That's
guide you through it and
amazing.
support you in doing it. We also have the world's only forgiveness app. If people go to their app store and type in Heartland, all one word, Heartland, Aramaic forgiveness, they'll be looking at the world's only forgiveness app. Download it free. It's a totally private app. And you can do the forgiveness process right there on the app, as well as ask us questions. You can, you come across step 3 on the worksheet and you go, I don't understand this. Click a button, send us a question. We'll answer it on the next radio show, email you back a link to the radio show so you can listen to the answer. So we're doing everything we can to support people and as freely as possible, taking these tools and putting them to work in their lives.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I have
Honored.
a lot to learn from you in that regard because that's where I'm going, just being able to support more people. But, at the same time, also, I'm a work in progress.
We all
Yeah,
are.
yes.
I've been doing my work now very consciously for the last 50 years. And I'm really clear that the most important and the deepest work I've done has been in the last 2 years. It's a lifetime process. It's not, people, well, oh, you got something for me? I got $5 in 5 minutes. Tell me everything you know. No, it's a constitutional growth that happens over time. You can't arrive there yesterday. I don't care how much
Mm.
you want to be there, you can't arrive there. In the ancient teachings, it said you can't storm the gates, and you just can't. It's a process. It takes work, and my objective, as I said, when I was in the electronic world, it had to work when it came off the other end of the bench, and so we've got several tools that are. You don't have to work at this for 50 years to develop this tool to start to use. Here it is. It's fairly formed. Take it, use it. We'll support you in learning how to use it, and you can save yourself 30 years, literally. I mean, the core of the forgiveness process from the Aramaic, it's so totally backward from what we've been taught in this culture. It literally took me 35 years working full time with the Aramaic language to understand what forgiveness meant. Because we've been so brainwashed that it's about me letting you off the hook. And so, kind of one of my pat bylines now is never forgive anybody, but forgive continuously. And people go, well, what do you mean never forgive anybody but forgive? continuously going inside your own structure and cleaning up the database that's in there. The database has been in development for thousands of generations. Everything that anybody in your bloodline has never dealt with is stored holographically in every cell of your structure. And in order to have an instrument that is a fit vehicle to bring love into the world, you've got to clean the instrument up. And that means you've got to look at and deal with the generational patterns.
I appreciate that. One of the things I've recently started doing is anytime I feel some sort of unpleasant feeling, I do my best to identify it. And then I ask myself, okay, so why am I feeling this way? I reason through it and I ultimately realize there's no rational reason for me to feel any kind of negative feeling. Yeah, but
Well, actually,
it
there
took me
is.
time to get there. Okay, I'm curious what you think.
There's a really good reason for it. You experience it, and that's because it's in there. That's all.
Mm.
I mean, our mind tells us I'm experiencing it because of what he did, or she did, or they did. But the truth is, the only reason I'm experiencing it is because it's in here. Now, instead of building a whole world of perception, there's some interesting Harvard research. It's actually the most quoted research in psychological history. And what they were able to do was show that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, there are 10,000 measurable units of electrical activity happening in the brain. The max amount of data that gets into conscious awareness is 9 bits. The mind is a reducing valve. And something determines which 9 bits of data we get to see, and that's the key to forgiveness. And it reduces or shuts down everything we don't want to look at or don't want to deal with. And that's what needs to be opened. And that's what forgiveness does. If it's done a la first century Aramaic Yeshua, if it's done a la Greeks, we just confound the insanity and perpetuate it.
I'm hearing like an undertone of personal responsibility, right? Like owning how we feel, not blaming others, and also patience is coming up for me, like being patient with ourselves, being patient with others. I feel like that's part of this forgiveness aspect from the way that you're sharing it.
It is.
Yeah, I
Very
think
definitely.
that's huge because a lot of us do, for some reason want to blame others for upsetting us.
It is the one world religion, and virtually everybody on the planet is trained into it from birth. It's
Mm.
the religion of blame. And when I blame, we've got a specific definition for the word denial in this work. And denial is the act of thinking or speaking as though something out there is the cause of what's moving in me. When I go into denial, you made me mad. What I'm saying to my mind is this: Mind, I know we got mad in there and it's all ours, but I'm not looking at it. So you shut that down and build me a picture of how Sorinne is the cause of my mad. Now my mind will build a construct that'll look like you, and my mad will be attached. And now I have the visual experience of it being all your fault. So, of course, I can blame you. What forgiveness does is it collapses that lie. Because anytime the mind is using any kind of data based in hostility or fear, the perceptual construct that my mind is showing me is the lie. And what I need to do is learn to collapse my lies. And when I collapse my lies, which is exactly what forgiveness does, I drop into the root of what's underneath it, and I get to access the original energetic pattern that's at the root of this projection. So if I live in denial, I literally have to hide something from myself. So I dissociate from the content of my own mind. And then whatever that is in me that I've dissociated from, here's the person who's bouncing off of it. So they resonate that in me. And I use that dissociated content to build my construct of them. So they show up in my mind with my problem attached. It's always a lie. The mind is always lying whenever there's hostility or fear moving in us, because that's a marker that there's corrupt data at the root of my perceptual mind. And so what forgiveness does is it collapses that construct so we can get to what underlies it and clean it out.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. Projecting these lies, it feels like it makes it difficult for us to actually observe life and the world and have experiences of people, as they really are. We're not really present when we're projecting these lies on everything and everyone. And so we can't make the right, decisions for ourselves when we're not actually perceiving the world and people and experiences as they really are.
Absolutely. I mean, when you recognize, in this time frame where there are 9 bits of data, according to the Harvard research, 10,000 brain cells firing, it's been estimated that in the same time frame, in the actuality of the world, there are perhaps as many as 20 trillion bits of data available. So our mind cuts down, if the 20 trillion number is accurate, cuts down 20 trillion bits of data to 10,000 and then to 9 bits. If I think in any way, shape, or form that this 9-bit mind is showing me a picture of what's happening out there, I'm insane. My constructs always tell me first about the content of my own mind, rather than telling me about the world I think I'm looking at. So you made me mad. I'm looking at my mad and projecting into my brain's image of you, but my mad is telling me that there's mad in here. Otherwise, I couldn't get mad. If it's not in here, nobody can cause anything to move in you. Nobody can resonate anything in you that isn't in you. So people say, oh, I'm angry because of Charlie. I'm angry because of Bill. I'm angry because of Harry. I'm angry because of Hortense. No, you're just angry. There's just anger in there. When you own that and stop putting it into your brain's image of everybody else, then if you don't like the anger, you can start to remove it. And that's forgiveness, is the removal of it. And anger is one of the most common drugs on the planet. People talk about it as an emotion. My offering is anger is not an emotion. Anger is a drug. It's an internally produced anesthetic that anesthetizes against pain. And when people use it, it's no different than a swig of alcohol. There's something moving in me I don't want to look at and I don't want to deal with. So I don't have to feel this anymore. Notice that even the physiology. What did I do? I just shut everything down. I dissociated from what it is that my pain is about. When I collapse constructs based in anger, I get to look at my pain. When I get rid of the anesthetic, now I'm face to face with my pain. And that's a difficult thing for people to do. It's a skill that takes time to do, but it's so worth understanding and doing.
Thank you for bringing that up. It actually reminds me of something you told me a few weeks ago, which I hadn't heard before, but it made a lot of sense to me because I'm doing a lot of inner work and I'm pulling
Right.
out those weeds and I forget exactly what you said, so I hope I do a good job paraphrasing to remind you.
Okay.
But basically, when we are working on ourselves and, moving out, removing the things that are holding us back, that are limiting us from, really experiencing life as it is, that it takes energy. And I forget exactly, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we can't just do it all at once, basically.
Right.
Could you share a little bit more about that? Because that was really significant to me. Because I do have I'm a recovering, type A personality, and sometimes it still comes up, and I don't really.
Well, the core of the healing process to me is, well, let me step back. About 30 years ago, I have a teaching center in the Ozarks in southern Missouri, a place called Heartland. We do residential intensives there. At least we did till COVID came along. It hasn't been open since COVID started. But we had an intensive going on. There's a group of about maybe 50 people in the room. And one person had a major life challenge that was right in their faces, and like mega major trauma. And they were able to just be with it and process through it. And it was like everybody got this was a miracle that this person was able to let go of that. And I was left in the space of, so why did this one individual out of 50 people in the room get this shift and 49 others didn't? What's the bottom line? What's the core of healing? And what I was shown is that two things have to happen for healing to occur. One, whatever it is hidden in the unconscious has to come forward, raw, directly, not projected into my brain's image of somebody else. If I project my rage into my brain's image of somebody over there, I'm in an indirect relationship with my rage. I don't believe it's mine. I can't get rid of it. When I collapse that perception, that projection, then I can access my rage directly. And if I can bring that rage forward in the presence of active love, there's a transmutation of energy and healing happens that fast. So two things have to happen. That errant energy that's hiding in me, that maybe I've been hiding or my generations have been hiding for 10 generations, has to come forward raw and straight. And I have to be able to hold love present when that happens. And being able to keep from getting lost in that hostility or fear that's coming up. Because most of us, it comes up and grabs us by the face and we're dragged right into it. But being able to step back and become the thinker apart from the thought, the feeler apart from the feelings, the actor apart from the actions, and hold active present love when that kind of pain comes up. And we're now in process work, and this begins to dissolve. And to do that, it's like any other skill. It takes time, it takes work, it takes practice. There's nobody, it's like I use the example oftentimes of, if I had Tiger Woods' phone number and I called him right now on my phone, I bet I could predict that he's on the golf course right now, this minute. I bet he's hitting driving balls, he's pitching, he's putting. Why is he such a great golfer? Because he's on the course every day. And he has the skill to bring forward what he's practiced. Most people want the skill yesterday. They don't want to work for it. Just show me how to forgive and get rid of all that stuff. It's like if I start dredging up generational hate, fear, rage, and guilt, and I don't have the constitutional ability to hold love present, it's going to take me a long time to start to move through that. It's a process, and you have to develop the skill to do the process. A few years ago, I bought a new computer and got the computer, set it up, and it didn't work properly. So I called tech support, and we spent a couple hours on the phone. Couldn't get it to work. Send it back. Okay, I sent it back. They ostensibly fixed it, sent it back to me, hook it up, still doesn't work. I called tech support. Another couple hours. Oh, send it back again. Okay, I send it back. They sent it back to me again, and it still doesn't work. I have a friend in Kansas City my son went to computer school with. He's a former NASA computer scientist. He had 2 or 3 businesses, so I didn't bother him. I didn't call him for stuff like that. But after 2 rounds of sending it to the manufacturer, I called Graham and I said, Graham, I got this computer and it's doing this and this. And he said, well, okay, go to a C prompt and type this in, hit a return and tell me what it says. So I read what comes up. He says, okay, type this in, hit a return, tell me what it says. Okay, type it in. He said, okay, type this in, your computer's fixed. It's like, come on, Graham, the manufacturer had it back twice. We spent hours. Michael, your computer is fixed. And guess what? It was fixed. Now, this guy was a former NASA computer scientist. He had the skill, he had the knowledge, he had the ability. Now, if you want Graham's level of knowledge and ability, you'll spend 30 years in the computer world. Somebody who opens their computer for the first time says, I want Graham's skills. It's not going to happen. You just have to take the time to develop the skills, and it's a process. And if you're an early adopter, if you're the first one in your bloodline, if you go to the Aramaic language, the word sin is an archery term. When you fired at the target and you miss the bullseye, the scorekeeper would yell sin. You're off the mark. That's all the word means, off the mark. And so when you recognize that, if I engage in an energy that doesn't belong in my human field, I'm in sin. I'm putting something in that's off the mark. And wherever I store it in my structure, because my structure is a living cell, if I put an energy that's off the mark in that living cell that doesn't belong in that living cell is going to start to weaken, get sick, and die. When they said the wages of sin is death, that wasn't some kind of theological threat. That was physiology. It's how we kill ourselves. And so if I recognize the truth of that, then I realize that everything that is off the mark in me, I need to bring up. Now, if my parents never conceived of living as love, if my grandparents, my uncle, I think about everybody in my bloodline, and there's nobody that I know that's ever stepped up to the plate and said, I'm going to dissolve the fear, the rage, the guilt, the pain in my structure. I'm going to take responsibility for it and work through. So I was the early adopter. If you're the early adopter, that means you're starting from scratch and going through generations and generations. And when they said the sins of the father passed to 3 and 4 generations, that wasn't some kind of theological threat. I can remember being a kid and being told, oh, God's going to get me for my father's sins. What? That wasn't a theological. They were just telling you how physiology works. At conception, every energy, including the energies that are off the mark in the male and the female, come together in a fertilized egg. And holographically, all of that stored in that structure. In terms of computer capacity or storage capacity, each body mind unit, I mean, we could take all of the Cray computers on the planet, wire them together, the supercomputers, and all of them wired together would even start to approximate what can be stored and what needs to be dealt with in one human form. And there's work to be done, and there's skills to be developed. And somebody who's the first one to step in, it can get pretty heavy duty, because there is such in the genes of every person on the planet. If you just look at some historical documentaries we've been recently watching, and we purposely watch stuff like this, so that rather than having to go out in the world and create it, okay, if this brings something up in me, then I have some work to do. But we've been watching a documentary series called The Vikings, and my wife and I looked at each other and we're like, oh, God, I can't believe that any human being ever actually lived like these people lived. It's just like, But if somebody's got Nordic genes, that's what's in their structures. Before that, we watched the series called Versailles, and you looked at how these people dealt with each other, and it's like, oh my God, the whole of Europe was just freaking insane. This is hundreds of years ago. What's gone on since then that comes into our genes? And that if we're going to really make of this body-mind unit a fit vehicle for the expression of love in the earth, then we're going to have to clean it out. And it's a pretty significant amount of work when you look at the state of the world today. There's a lot of work for every one of us to do. And I don't care whether it's the doctor, the lawyer, or the Indian chief. I don't care if it's the person at the bottom of the barrel or it's the wealthiest person in the world. If they haven't cleaned up their instrument, don't expect sanity from them, because it's not going to happen.
Thank you for all those great points. I especially appreciate, well, what I'm picking up is, it's a matter of what we prioritize, because consistency and repetition really matters when we're changing which of our DNA is being expressed, right? Because our DNA is just the blueprint, and we have much of it that isn't being expressed, and so we can choose to express something else versus what's been, I don't know if this is the right word, pre-wired into us, what we've inherited. And so I appreciate that. And that's something I make an effort every day. I have certain practices that I do no matter what, because I know they help make life better. But it's because I make my own personal evolution a priority, because I recognize how that influences everyone around through vibration. I don't even have to say anything. Just as I change, my frequency changes, and so I'm emitting it, differently, and so people feel that and pick up on that.
The law of resonance.
Yeah. I've got a question for you. I hope it's okay. I don't know if you're still practicing or not. You're a chiropractor, or
I'm actually
you said naturopath. Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure.
I used to teach at Life Chiropractic College.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I haven't had a one-on-one practice for 30 years. My work the last 30 years has been directly in teaching. So that's the focus of my work. Oh, your voice just disappeared.
Oops, sorry about that.
Okay.
The reason I was asking is not necessarily because of if you're practicing or not, but I'm sure that you picked up certain principles about healing there, as you were talking about anger I was thinking about how it creates certain diseases that many doctors struggle to address, right? Like
Yes.
we have this typical Western model that just focuses on, masking symptoms, changing
Treatment.
symptoms, but not addressing the cause, right? They
Treatment
call
instead of healing.
yeah, results is just changing symptoms around versus actually healing a person. So I'm curious if you can share about how that connects to everything that you're doing, because I'm sure that it does.
Well, if we go to the opening words in the book of John in the New Testament, the Greeks tell us it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. In Aramaic, what it says is, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. Now, if you go into the cell biologist laboratory today, you can check out the work of Bruce Lipton. And what he's showing is that when you think a thought, that thought produces a molecule in your structure. So we have this energetic pattern we'd call a thought. Think of it as a coiled spring. And it's non-physical, quote unquote. And when we focus it and we bring it in, it's now compressing, and it's becoming a molecule called a neuropeptide. That neuropeptide circulates around in the structure till it finds a cell with a receptor site that matches, and it lands on the cell. If we were looking from the inside of the cell, when it lands on the cell, it literally inserts its energetic structure into the cell. And what we would see, what we would call it, is that what's coming into the cell is chemistry. So this energetic pattern, when it lands in the cell, looks like chemistry. If it's of a disintegrative nature, if it's sin, if it's off the mark, then now we've introduced destructive chemistry into the cell. And if you think of this mind energy is an energy pattern that gets compressed, and then the mind wants to use that energy as part of building my perception, and I go, no, hold my breath, shut it down, dissociate from it. It's like I'm pushing energy into that spring. And for thousands of years, we've had generations and generations that have been pushing down those patterns that we don't want to look at. Ultimately, what forgiveness means is that I'm going to take that, if you think about the coil spring in a car, coil spring is designed to compress. And when you're driving along and you hit a bump, it absorbs a bump. And if that mind energy has been compressed, the more I press it down, the more I don't want to look at it, the more I don't want to deal with it, the stronger the energetic emanation that I was talking about that Marcel Vogel was able to measure, the stronger that energy is going to be, the stronger the influence is it's going to bring somebody into my life, and the more powerful the toxic effect's going to be on the cell where it doesn't belong, or the organ system where it doesn't belong. As you say, most so-called healing focuses on symptoms and suppressing symptoms. Every drug is a disease disguised as a cure. If you open that package and you read the insert on it, they'll have a whole list of diseases caused by this substance. Now, it may be able to suppress this set of symptoms. So treatment-wise, I say, oh, I feel better because these symptoms are gone. But what kind of diseases did I introduce to my structure when I put that substance in there? Now, there are times where that can be appropriate. That can be helpful. It can give somebody time to work through what they need to work through. But to me, the physician who only practices treatment and does not offer healing at the same time is malpractice. So where, gee, somebody's in a lot of pain, you take an aspirin, that can be really helpful because it's really hard to focus on doing my work of healing if I'm in so much pain that I can hardly think about what's going on here. So it can be appropriate. Gee, I've got some pain. I know I have some healing work to do. I know that there's some energies in me that are compressed, and I'm going to have to access them directly in the presence of love and burn them off. In the meantime, though, I'm going to take the aspirin to cut the pain down so that I can focus on the work I need to do. And so what the forgiveness process does is it literally, step by step, takes these generationally compressed energies that we call dis-ease, that are energies that are off the mark. Now, I love what Einstein says. He says, on such things as matter, we've been all wrong. what we have heretofore called matter is energy. Energy whose vibrations have been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. Einstein says a material world doesn't exist. We have an energetic world. Our eye makes it look solid, but there's nothing solid about it. My hands don't pass through each other. They must be solid. Well, wait a minute. If this was a radio wave would go right through. Obviously, it's not solid. It's energy. So relative to this integrated energy system, there are energies that build it up, integrative, and energies that tear it down, disintegrative. If I put that energy, or my generations put that energy into my cellular structure, I'm going to, in order to be relieved of it, I'm going to have to be willing to allow that to uncoil, that energetic, that compressed energy, allow it to uncoil and be with its content, no matter how horrific it was, and develop the strength to hold love present while that comes forward. And that dissolves the disintegrative energy, the trauma energy, and frees us from it. That's healing. Treatment's a different thing. Lay them side by side, you got a winning combination.
Thank you for explaining the difference there. I think that's so important. And again, bringing up the significance of going back and uncovering the things that essentially are enslaving us, no matter how uncomfortable it might feel at first, we can work through it with love and forgiveness. Um, that's something that I recently started doing because I was missing that part in my work. I
Yeah,
kept
it's
I
a, it's
kept
an
moving
important thing.
forward, but there are all these things. I'm like, they're still coming up. I need to go out and, just pull all these things out. I need to face them. And then I got a little excited and was doing too much at once. So now I'm pacing myself. And that's also
Right.
why I appreciate you sharing that earlier as well. Um,
Cool.
there's something, I also appreciate basically, I feel like there's a saying, thoughts become things. But
Yes.
I feel like what we've covered here is really thoughts are things. We can
Yep.
measure them.
Mind energy becomes flesh.
Yeah. And a lot of people, I feel that's important for them to understand that, everything starts in the mind and that, choosing to have thoughts that have desirable consequences is in everyone's best benefit, and that's something um, you said something earlier that got me thinking about, what is the only freedom that we really have, and that's choice, right? We get to choose what we think about. We get to choose how we feel. We get to choose how we respond. We get to choose what we focus on. And
If,
that's so important. Yes.
if we develop choice. But the mind has a cheap copy of everything real in the spiritual dimension. Choice is a spiritual faculty. The mind makes decisions. And most people think they're thinking when they make a decision. For instance, if I say, don't think about the color of your car, I just set up a frequency with my voice, went through this little microphone here, transmitted and came out your little plastic speaker there and caused an eardrum to vibrate in you. And when I said, don't think about the color of your car, what happened inside of you?
I thought about the color of my car.
So my offering is that's not thinking, that's just resonance.
Hmm.
That's a decision. The mind is a decision-making device, and everything that is presented that it has brain cells for, it spits whatever it's got. So to call I was thinking about the color of my blue car thinking is just not it's most people if they said what they thought they'd be speechless because the mind is just continuously resonating whatever content it has and spitting up whatever decisions it has about whatever the situation is that's presented. So whatever's resonated the strongest in the mind will become the mind's answer. I only become a thinker when I can cut myself loose of that and originate something. Remember, Fleet talks about origination. I have to be able to originate rather than replicate. All that this, what I call the carbon-based memory can do is replicate whatever's in it, which means that in order to think about it, in order to conceptualize something from what's stored in this body mind unit, which is made of carbon-based memory, it has to be in carbon-based memory to start with. So everything that resonates in us is from the past. Yeshua had a saying for those who lived in the past. He said, let the dead bury the dead and let the blind lead the blind, because there's no life in the mind replicating stuff from the past. It's only when we wake up spiritually, we're choice. Now, with choice, I can introduce a whole new frequency into my mind that's never been there before. But if this question resonates, some trauma, pain, something that screams and rages inside of me, it's not very likely I'm going to be able to bring a new energy into my mind. So I apply forgiveness to that to weaken what's in the past until I've developed the strength to stay awake on a spiritual level and say to my mind, okay, I can see that you got some real pain about that, and I'm going to bring something new in. And I'm going to dissolve this pain. And I'm going to make of my body-mind unit a space where a whole new creative process happens. I bring in original creation rather than replicate the past. Remember that story of the Jews wandering in the desert? Pardon me, the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years. Now, you think about that one. Here's a very bright group of people. They've written about astronomy. They know astronomy very well. And somebody wants us to believe that they get lost in a 35 square mile area for 40 years. I mean, it's pretty silly. They knew the sun came up in the east and set in the west. If they knew they wanted to go west, a few days in a 35 square mile area and you're out of the desert. That desert is a code word for the unconscious. Most people wander about 40 years in the desert unconsciously, going, why is this happening to me again? And why are they doing this to me? Before they one day go, oh, I've been through this 87 different times with 42 different people. I'm the only one that was there every time. Maybe this is about me. Maybe I need to start to open the veil of my own temple and start to look at what's in here and own it. Because only when I own it can I throw it out. Can I forgive it? And if you remember, if you look at that passage about being lost in the desert, you read the way they got out of the desert into what was called the promised land was, I said, the old generation had to die off. Now, that didn't mean that everybody in old physical bodies had to physically die. The root of the word generation is genari. It means cause. All of the causes held in the genetic structure from the past had to be processed and removed in order to get into the promised land. What's the promised land? It's conscious co-creation. I originate a frequency based in love. I put it into my mind. Everything in my mind and my body and my genes supports it, and I've created it anew. Now I'm in the promised land, conscious co-creation, rather than replicating the stuff from the past again and again and again, because I'm making decisions, but I think I'm thinking. So thinking is something is done by the being, by the soul. It's not done by the mind. The mind is the great pretender. And we need to be out of it. In order to truly heal, you got to be out of your mind. It's just, it's part of the process. And what forgiveness does is it gives you a minute to be out of your mind. Or, it might just be a fraction of a second before it jumps back in with its decisions, with its story. And what forgiveness does is it consistently and persistently collapses the mind. They talk about a near-death experience where clinical death occurs. And what happens is this whole carbon-based memory system in clinical death shuts down. It shuts up. And this being gets a chance to go, oh, I'm a being. I am love. Oh, different world, light. Oh, man, look at this. And then if that clinical death is overcome and somebody starts to breathe again and they come back in with a new awareness. If you read the stories of, they call them near-death experiences, but it's really near-life experience. Most people are dead to the state of being because of the trauma held in their minds. And so if trauma is moving and I'm living out of a self that's based in trauma, Yeshua said that self, in order for you to live, you've got to die. You've got to get rid of that self. Clinical death gets rid of it in an instant. If you're lucky enough to be resuscitated and you remember, your life's going to change. Read the near-death experiences. They're actually near life. It's where somebody gets to taste life without reference to the past, the genes, and carbon-based memory. And if they can maintain that, then there's going to be a whole different process happen in their lives. What forgiveness does, as Yeshua taught it, is it collapses those constructs of the mind and gives somebody sometimes just a fraction of a second of a taste of a near-death experience, near-life experience, where they touch into themselves as love. Then the mind rushes right back in to fill the space, rushes back in and fill, rushes. But in between, this constitutional growth happens. Each time you collapse the perceptual constructs of the mind, you get to taste on another level, living as a human, as created love. And when that becomes a strong enough constitutional growth, then you move to a whole new level of doing your work and cleaning up the genes, the generations, and you move into conscious co-creation. That's what we're here to do.
Thank you for all of your wisdom and for sharing it in just a very logical manner. It's a lot, to take it in from this perspective. I'm going to be taking notes when I review this conversation because it's we all have work to do, and myself included. So this isn't just for people tuning in. This is, for me, and I think today I probably learned more than you did, but I'm grateful for your energy. I'm curious, a couple things. One, before we finish up, if you could give me your definition of forgiveness again, and two, before we get to that, if there's anything that you want to touch on that we haven't discussed yet. I know there's a lot that I feel like you're just overflowing with wisdom that's very practical and applicable.
It works. I just sent you a few minutes ago a link to the forgiveness app, and I'm getting ready to send you a link to a 3-hour workshop called Why Is This Happening to Me Again? It's one I did last June. And so it's one of the latest embodiments of this whole structure of forgiveness and the how-to. So between the app and this 3-hour workshop, and you're welcome if you want to put it in the notes so anybody can access it, they're free. And then, as I say, they can call a radio show and ask questions about it. Because when you realize the major attribute of what I like to call the non-being mind or the non-being self is inertia. If you remember the definition of inertia from physics class in high school, a body moving in a particular direction, a particular rate of speed, will tend to continue to move that direction at that rate of speed until it's acted upon by an outside force. If you don't, as a being, become the outside force to your carbon-based memory system and change its inertia-bound propensities, then life is just going to keep doing what it's always done. It's going to be another why is this happening to me again, another and another and another. If you start to act upon that generational structure and acting upon it, the key tool, again, is forgiveness. And forgiveness is a tool with which you collapse perception. Nothing to do with letting others off the hook. Now, and let's just cover that just a little bit more. You'll notice that, unless somebody's just a generally miserable person, they're pretty happy with what everybody's doing all the time. As long as they're doing what you want them to do, things are cool. When do we get into upset towards someone? When they violate a goal we hold for them. When do we get into upset about ourselves? When we violate a goal we hold for ourselves. Oh, damn, I didn't do it. What happened? I just touched into the file in me with rage in it toward myself. That's a construct in my mind. If I don't know how to dissolve, if I don't know how to collapse that, I'm in trouble, because it's going to run my mind as long as that energy is active in my mind. So in the Aramaic language, and this is the core of forgiveness, and it's going to sound absolutely ridiculous, because it is ridiculous until you understand how the mind works and recognize that our minds have got it backward. Everything that's pained in me, when I live in denial, you made me, I turn backward. I take the pain in me and I make it into a picture of whoever I'm focused on. Again, the one world religion of blame. When I decide to change that, the thing that causes my mind to pick this 9 bits of data out of the 10,000 brain cells firing is my goal. The goal is the driver for the perceptual construct of the moment. So, Bill comes to me and, there's a potential for relationship and I want Bill to treat me lovingly, gently, and with respect. And he obeys my unconscious demand that he abuse me. And I go into rage because you didn't treat me love. No, I go into rage because there's rage in me. And my goal for him to treat me lovingly, gently, and with respect is what causes my mind to use that rage to build my brain's image of him. I need to collapse that lie. How do I do it? In the Aramaic language, the word forgive is shabag or shabak, and it means to cancel. I cancel the goal that drives the perceptual process that has me take everything I don't want to look at and put it into my brain's image of everybody else so I can pretend everybody else is the problem in my life. The core of forgiveness consists of identifying precisely the goal that I hold at this moment for whoever my object of attention is, whether it's me or someone else or my car or, whatever it is. The car stalls on the highway and I get out and kick it. I'm enraged at the car. A car can make me mad. Well, if my goal is to get somewhere and I've got anger in the file about getting somewhere and my car breaks down, I can blame the car and kick the car. So what do I need to do? I need to cancel my goal for the car to take me where I want to go. And when I do that, my perception, the construct of my mind, collapses in on itself. Now I get to look at what's under the rage. And when I can bring what's under the rage forward in the presence of love, it dissolves. In an instant, it dissolves. And that's where healing happens.
Thank you for that. I'm going to probably have a list of questions and topics I want to discuss with you the next time we do
Oh,
this, if
great.
you're
That'll
open
be
to
awesome.
it.
Yeah, of course. We've got, there's a worksheet. Uh, the app that I sent you a link to, again, if you go to your app store on your phone, iPhone or Android, and just type in Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness, it'll come up. There's a heart, and you open it, and there are two different versions of the step-by-step worksheet process for how to do the forgiveness process. There is a children's game called the Dragon Klingon game for teaching children how to forgive. And then there are several links to the different tools we teach. Again, on every page, you can just click a button, send us a question. Well, I don't understand this. This doesn't make any sense. Tell me why. Send it to us. We'll read it and answer it on the next radio show and send you a link back and tell you where we answered the question so you can go listen to it.
Hmm.
Or
Thank
you can
you
call
so
into the show and
much.
ask. Hey, you're welcome.
Yeah,
Delighted. That's what
just
we're here
for
for.
being you, for doing all this. It's just amazing. It's been an honor getting to know you better. I'm sure that everyone that's tuning in is also appreciative of just how generous you are with your wisdom, energy.
My son is 43 and we birthed him at home. I got to catch him. And I can remember standing in my living room with this 6-pound baby boy in my hands and thinking, if somebody doesn't do something, there isn't going to be a world for this kid to grow up in. And this is what I did. That's what took my commitment to the next level. And since then, I've basically done my workshops free. I travel the globe, or well, we don't do it anymore. We actually moved to Bristol, Virginia to take care of my wife's dad about 4 years ago and our granddaughter. So we stopped traveling. But for the 40 years before that, basically my wife and I traveled 6 to 10 months of the year. We went anywhere on the surface of the earth we were invited to go. We paid our own expenses and our workshops were free. So we're here to just put it out and make it available because somebody had to do something. This is it for me.
It's good to know your way, your purpose, your mission, your duties, whatever you call it. It's good to know it and to live it.
One of our workshops is purpose, personal power, and commitment. And we look at we've got a worksheet for how people can determine exactly what their purpose is. Because so many people are just swimming in the brainwash of, oh, you're supposed to be a good commercial servant, go get a job, make money, pay taxes, and die. Like, that's not anybody's purpose. Nobody. But that's what the world brainwashes into kids. So we've got a worksheet for working through that, getting really aligned and recognizing that we're energy systems. Energy systems don't bring through more energy by efforting and struggling. They bring in through more energy by aligning. When we align with our purpose, personal power shows up. Just everything comes to a whole new level. So That's
Hmm.
what it's all about, Elfie.
Yes, indeed. If you feel okay with it, if we're complete for today, I'd like to wrap us up with a closing concept. Does
Please
that
do.
sound good? Perfect.
Perfect.
And
Let's go for it.
thank you everyone for tuning in. I am the place where life shines through, for life and I are one, not two. Life wants me where and as I am. I need not fret, nor fear, nor plan. If I will be relaxed and free, life will carry out its work through me.